Investment banker Richard Blum has been selling post offices across the country to his business associates. He's the chairman of the CBRE Group, which is the largest commercial real estate firm in the world. Blum is also, get this, he's the husband of California Senator Dianne Feinstein. The Postal Service awarded a contract to CBRE to sell unused properties and buildings. That agreement was made in 2011. The decision has caused some critics to charge the United States Postal Service with moving towards franchising its locations. If this happens, business associates of Feinstein and Blum stand to make a lot of money. Some estimate upwards of $1 billion. Investigative reporter Peter Byrne started looking into the activities of Blum and CBRE. What he found was a pattern of acquiring the properties from taxpayers at bargain rates and then selling the real estate to business associates and friends. The reporter spent years investigating Dianne Feinstein, and his book, Senator Warbucks, received awards from the California Newspaper Publishers Association and Project Censor. Peter Byrne now has a new book. This latest work from the investigative journalist takes a close look at the developing real estate scandal. The book is called Going Postal. This latest work from Byrne reveals multiple conflicts of interest and a damning audit of Blum being covered up by none other than the Obama administration. Peter Byrne is our guest today on the show. He's here to talk to us about the post office controversy, the possible role played by Senator Feinstein, and his new book. Welcome to WHDT World News, Peter.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Now, Peter, let's get to the beginning of this investigation. How did Richard Blum become involved in this scandal? How did he acquire these properties and the rights to sell them?
Blum is an investment banker who runs a firm called Blum Capital Partners and has for many years. A few years ago, he managed $3 billion worth of private investment funds, and he buys and sells companies. Some years back, we called this kind of transaction junk bond dealing. But after the savings and loan debacle of the 1980s, the junk bond kings changed the name of what they did to private equity investing. It sounds much better, doesn't it? What they often do is they buy businesses, they gut them, they load them up with debt, and then they sell them and run away from them, just making a profit off of the destruction of businesses. Blum does that, but he also buys businesses that he doesn't gut, that he actually runs. CBRE, or CB Richard Ellis, is now the largest real estate firm in the world, largely because Blum, as chairman for the last decade or so, and also as the primary investor in the company, primary owner of the company, has been acquiring other real estate companies at a mad pace. So he put together this huge conglomerate, which actually feeds off of government contracts at the local and state and regional and federal levels. That's one of its primary sources of income, is managing real estate for the federal government. Prior to 2011, the United States Postal Service had its own internal real estate management division. It occasionally outsourced management tasks to realtors like Blum's firm and Jones LaSalle and other firms. But in 2011, the Postal Service decided to award a single contract for all of its real estate transactions, all of its sales and all of its leasing to a single firm. It invited 6 firms to bid. It did not select based on the best price, and it didn't say why it selected, but it did select CBRE.
So let me go back. There were six firms that put bids in. CBRE did not have the best price. However, the post office went ahead and selected CBRE to be the real estate firm to broker these deals.
Well, we don't know exactly what the price was that they bid, because they treat these documents like state secrets. They're actually public records, but the post office has refused to release them.
Can the documents be released through Freedom of Information Act requests?
I put in many Freedom of Information requests, and I got thousands of pages of documents, including invoices and stuff like that. But the two major things that I could not pry loose from the post office were the actual bid documents and the appraisals that CBRE made of all the properties that it subsequently sold. Because the contract was a very unusual contract. In fact, the Inspector General for the Post Office noted that such a contract had never been let before. And what it does is it gives one company the charge of making the appraisals, that is determining the fair market value of the post office properties, which include post offices and warehouses and parking lots all over the country, $85 billion worth of property, in fact. It charged CBRE with appraising the fair market value of these properties, and then it charged...
You said a number there. The property is $85 billion. That's the total amount.
$85 billion is what the Inspector General found that the fair market value of all the Postal Service properties in the country are. Okay. And so one firm is in charge of unloading whatever percentage of those properties gets unloaded. Now, just to back up for a second, I don't know if your viewers are aware, but the post office is not really broke. Back in 2006, Congress arbitrarily mandated that the post office prepay 75 years worth of retiree health care benefits worth $75 billion or $55 billion, and it had to do it within 10 years, which meant that automatically the post office was hit with a $5.5 billion deficit every year. Before that, it had been in the black. So this was an opportunity for those who want to privatize the post office to say, look, it can't operate its own business well, it's fiscally unsound, let's take it over. But in fact, it was an arbitrary hit to the budget. And
No, Peter, I don't want to go off on too deep of a tangent, but do you believe that was done intentionally?
Oh, absolutely, it was done intentionally. It was promoted by Darrell Issa, who's a representative from the San Diego area in California. And it was insane. No other government agency or business in the world is required to prepay 75 years worth of pension funds. And the irony of it is that the post office had actually already prepaid something like $80 billion worth of pension funds. So it was a complete red herring. It was a completely made-up excuse to kind of hobble the post office. Now, I'm not going to claim that the post office is well run, because actually it's not. And there's a lot of shenanigans and hanky-panky and outright fraud going on at the top. So I'm not going to make a case that it couldn't benefit from being privatized. I'm just going to say that the move towards privatization began with burdening it with this unreasonable financial albatross. And so subsequently, people that want to privatize the post office have been pointing to its financial situation as making that warranted, but that's just a red herring. That's not really the case.
And now moving forward to the sell-off of these properties.
Well, that was because the post office was in financial trouble. Then the case could be made that it needed to raise ready cash, and so a decision was made at the L'Enfant Plaza, Washington D.C. headquarters of the post office to sell as much quote-unquote excess property as possible. But what they call excess property, other people call their local post office. And so
this really goes down quite a rabbit hole. So let me just backtrack here for our viewers, and you can correct me here if I'm off base. But through this congressional bill, it forced the post office to pay 75 years into the future of retirement benefits, putting it into a deficit, causing a reaction that said, "Hey, we need to sell these properties off to pay off this deficit." And so, I guess let me dig for a second here. Is there a connection between Issa supporting such a bill and now Feinstein's husband getting this contract? I mean, there's only so many degrees of separation here.
Well, clearly, the post office would never have gone down the route of selling off these properties if the post office had not been burdened with this phony deficit. So the next question that you probably will ask, what is Feinstein's involvement in this? And aside from the fact that she's one of the most powerful senators in the United States. She's the chairperson of the Senate so-called Intelligence Committee, for example, and was standing next to Barack Obama when he was sworn in. She's extremely powerful politically. I did actually track down a conflict of interest in regard to all of this directly related to her. It's in my book, which it's an EPUB, and it's also available in print for people that don't like to read online or EPUB, so you can get it through the monopoly company Amazon. It's called Going Postal. U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein's husband sells post offices to his friends cheap. I was able to show that back in 2007, a large investment firm that you may have heard of called Lehman Brothers funded a several $100 million real estate deal in Southern California, where a series of real estate companies were redeveloping a decommissioned military base, El Toro Air Base in near Aliso Viejo, California, in the San Diego area. And one of the companies that was involved in that redevelopment project was CBRE, which was at the time, as it is now, chaired by Feinstein's husband. Using the Freedom of Information Act, I obtained a letter that Feinstein wrote to the Postmaster General, the post office was at that point going to put a junk mail facility, a huge, expensive junk mail facility in Aliso Viejo, not too far away from the redevelopment project in the El Toro military base.
So let me just recap here. Feinstein wrote a letter to the Postmaster General, and she was advocating that this junk mail facility be established in the old military base?
That it be moved from the small town where they were going to put it to the military base. She did not tell the Postmaster General that her family had a financial interest in that, because as an anchor tenant, which is what you want to do when you do a redevelopment, the post office is really important because businesses like to be around them, and they pay a lot of rent and make a property more valuable.
So the redevelopment of the military base would contain this new facility, because this new facility, the new military base would be, they take the fences down, it's open to the public, so now it's a redevelopment of a military base with a post office junk mail facility in it, initiated by Feinstein.
Right, and surrounded by businesses and residential areas. And at the time, Feinstein was also on a Senate committee that was charged with decommissioning these bases and privatizing the bases. So she kind of had a double conflict of interest going. It was an extraordinary letter. It basically wrote directly to the Postmaster General, interfered in an ongoing real estate deal. So why don't you go move it to this base without telling him that she had a financial interest in it. Prima facie, on the face of it, conflict of interest. It's indictable. I was going to say, since we're talking about Freedom of Information Act and Feinstein, I also got all these emails that her staff members were sending to the Postal Service officials in Washington after her family got the contract to sell off these post offices. And they were interfering in every way imaginable. They were interfering in how the post office was handling environmental reviews of post offices that were going to be sold.
So Blum and Feinstein's family were interfering with other activities with the Postal Service?
Yeah, her staff members on Capitol Hill were emailing and talking to high-ranking post office officials.
Peter, hold that thought. I want to come back after the break and go deeper into this topic about the conflict of interest occurring between Feinstein, Blum, and the U.S. Postal Service. We'll be right back.